Good morning, hello, and welcome to this morning's seminar with Paula Gardner. Morning, Paula. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. You too?
Good. Yes. So this morning's seminar, we are going to be talking specifically about burnout within hospitality and how we spot, manage, and prevent burnout. This is a free seminar that the Burnt Chef Project will be putting on. And we'd be very much looking forward to your feedback once this seminar has finished. We expect it to take about an hour to an hour and a half approximately. Would that be fair, Paula?
Yes. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. If I could ask again, Paula, just to introduce yourself and introduce your background, and I'll let you take it on from there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Well, hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. So my name is Paula Gardner. I am a business psychologist, a psychotherapist, and basically I help businesses and their employees deal with things like stress, burnout, productivity, all those things that are a part of our working lives nowadays. And came across the Burnt Chef probably more than a year ago now, when a friend of mine invited me onto the Burnt Chef podcast. And I think it's an amazing organisation doing something that is really much needed. Hospitality, as we know, can be a very fulfilling industry and very creative, but it has its own stresses. And I'll be talking you through some of those today and their link between those stresses and burnout and what we can do about it. I'll be taking the two viewpoints. So one is if you're a manager or responsible for other people, how you can spot signs of burnout in yourself and some suggestions of things to do about it. But also I'll be looking at it from an individual's point of view. So if you're concerned that, you may be on the road to burnout, just sort of look at, whether that might be the case and what you can do about it. So there's two levels going on today. So as I mentioned, found out about the Burnt Chef over a year and a half ago and was incredibly excited to find out about all the different things it offers. And you can see a little bit here, and also you can check out Burnt Chef pages on LinkedIn and Facebook and obviously the website to find out more. But just moving on to today, as I mentioned, I'm a psychotherapist and business psychologist. And what I am doing today is giving you an overview. So while I am a therapist, this isn't a therapy session. So, if anything does come up that you think, okay, I need a little bit of help and support with that, then obviously you can check out the Burnt Chef for resources. Also, as we know, in the UK, the NHS offers free therapy. And there are many, many websites and charities all over the world that you can access someone to talk to. And sometimes even, just talking to a friend is enough. It is about getting those worries and concerns off our chest sometimes. So if anything does come up for you, do look for support, whether it's the Burnt Chef or other organizations or people. Okay, so let's get going. So today we're going to look at what burnout is. We're going to look at why it's so common in hospitality and how we can spot burnout in ourselves and others. Now, I'm going to be looking at burnout from the lens of the Human Givens, which is the school of psychotherapy that I work with. It probably is quite new for many of you, so I'm going to be giving you a little bit insight into that. And actually, it was how Chris reached out to me, because he had done some training with the Human Givens too, and he mentioned that it was one of the things which inspired him to set up Burnt Chef. We'll be looking at how we can prevent burnout, both in ourselves and others, if we're on the road to it, or indeed in the midst of it, care and management of it, and then looking at some resources. So I'll be stopping at various points and checking on the comments and asking for your thoughts and feedback. So do feel free to share when I ask you. What's great is if it's not just me, spouting off and talking to everybody, if you have lived experience or a certain tool and technique that you have found helpful when it comes to dealing with burnout with yourself or others, then please do feel free to share that, because obviously it's all about helping each other here. So that's what we'll be covering today. That's our agenda, and obviously some resources at the end. So first of all, what is burnout? That's the big question. And it's really interesting that a lot of people equate burnout with fatigue, with being a bit fed up, with exhaustion. And there's elements of all those within it, but that's not quite the whole story. So World Health Organization has this particular definition of burnout. It's a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It's characterized by 3 dimensions. So the first is that feeling of energy depletion or exhaustion. That's real fatigue. The second is mental distance from the job, feelings of negativity or cynicism. So that's lack of motivation, feeling as though you can't be bothered, or spotting that behavior in other people. And finally, reduced ability, reduced productivity, sort of mistakes are made. It's that reduction all around. So that's what the World Health Organization talks about it. And if you look at all those things involved, it actually is quite serious from a personal point of view, and also from an industry point of view, impacting on the workplace. And one thing that is not mentioned here is that, burnout there are links between burnout and depression. So that, again, is something for us to be aware of and careful of, especially with the growing rates of depression in the world nowadays. So what this means in the workplace. So if you're an employer or a manager, or even just looking around in the workplace, you might see absenteeism, people being off. And this isn't necessarily just because they're off because they're not motivated and can't be bothered to come into work. They may be off because they have mental health issues, because they have physical health issues. As I mentioned, illness is linked with burnout, and I'll be talking about that in a little bit more detail. A lack of engagement with the work, with colleagues and customers, disruptive behavior, negative impact on morale, substance abuse and addictions. And I'll be talking about that because basically, if you are feeling burned out, you turn to something for comfort. And for many of us, that comfort is not, carrots and meditation. It's something which actually isn't great for us. High staff turnover. And, I mentioned the link between burnout and depression, but, it does raise the risk for suicide. This is why we really have to be aware of it. So here are 3 random people. They're not real people, but I've used them to illustrate what burnout can look like. Because even with those descriptors of what burnout looks like, it still can be hard to spot in somebody. So let's take Joel. So as a manager or a colleague, you're not sure if he'll actually turn up for shifts. When he does, he's jolly enough and, part of the team. But there's an element of something that feels a little bit fake. He may often use energy drinks, caffeine, sugar even, just to, keep going. And he doesn't look particularly well. There's something, it feels as though he's running on adrenaline, running on caffeine. Chris, people are asking if it's going to be recorded. Just checking with you on that one.
Yes, it will be recorded and be available afterwards on both LinkedIn and Facebook, so you can continue to see this there. And we might also put this up on our YouTube channel as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. So yes, so Joel. So you can see that, he basically, he's got the energy, but, that energy is quite inauthentic. It's being supplied by other things. Then we have Mia. Mia is first to complain and egg on others in complaints. Poor performance, you may have hired her or she started off, working well, but that performance has gone down. Not particularly interested in learning anything new. She's disengaged, basically. And you often hear about her own, sleep issues. She's irritable, doesn't get along particularly well with colleagues. And then there's Addy. So Addy is, really good at his job, but actually he's got a lot of physical issues going on. These are genuine. It's not making it up. But the more he's off, especially as a manager, this is impacting not himself, but everybody else in the team. And like Mia, once, like there was a lot of potential there, seen as a real high flyer, but not so much anymore. And you get the feeling that he's being ground down. And, there may be some weight loss there, or weight gain. But, there's definitely indulging in bad habits, using those coping mechanisms of perhaps turning to sugar or comfort food or caffeinated drinks or whatever it is to get him through the day. The interesting thing about these three people is, once upon a time, perhaps at the start of their career with you, they weren't like this. So it's not a personality thing. It is something that is going on, their response to the environment. So what is going on? So actually, Joel is pushing himself through the shifts, but he's finding work stressful. Maybe his home life is stressful too. And he's lost hope that things will ever change. And he occasionally thinks of suicide as a way out. And I think as managers, we have to get comfortable with, thinking about, talking about suicide, being aware that it's something that can creep in to the workplace. So, if you are at all upset or triggered by this, I do apologize. And again, do look for, resources and people that can help you through this. But I think it's important that we talk about these things. So basically, as my dad would say, he's at the end of his tether. He's at his wit's end, really. He's just pushing himself. Mia's living in the future. She's looking for a new job, fantasizing about bad-mouthing you to the industry, even if you as a workplace have not done anything wrong. Her perception of it is that you will have, and that it would have been, piled on her. And Addy, bless him, he's trying really hard, but that stress is going to lead to diabetes within the next year, and of course that's going to compound the amount of time that he has off, and also limit his ability to help others. So while on the top, when we look at all those behaviors going on, we may be tempted to think, oh, okay, well, they were once, promising, and, they haven't turned out the way that we thought we might be. Underneath, you can see very real people with very real problems, which can be linked to burnout. So what causes it? So apologies to anyone who knows anything about, neuroscience and the brain here, because this is going to be very simple. But so here's a very simple diagram of the brain. And there's this little area around here called the amygdala. It's about the size of a bean. And this area here is basically our neocortex. And those are the two areas that I'm going to talk about today, which are really important. And I'm going to take you right back right back to when our ancestors were, out hunting on the plains, and they would hear a movement, a rustle, or whatever it might be, and immediately their body, thinking that it could be a predator, would get ready for action. And what would happen is this amygdala, this tiny little organ here, would send out cortisol and adrenaline that floods the brain and switches on certain things in our body. It makes our heart beat faster, ready to run, which means our chest starts to constrict, maybe our breath gets shallower. It sends the blood from the organs and the skin to the muscles ready to take action. And that action could be running or fighting. So we're talking about the fight or flight reaction here, which I'm sure many of you would have heard of. So heart beating faster, chest maybe constricted or certainly feeling tight, the the energy, the glucose being transferred in the blood, going to our muscles, our sense of sight and our hearing would become ultra focused. And generally we would feel pumped up and ready for action. And in some people, that might feel pumped up, but in other people, that excess of chemicals might make them feel a bit dizzy or a bit nauseous. And also stomach, because the blood and the glucose is going to our muscles ready to take action. Our stomach and intestines, they may start to constrict as well. So that's when we get that sort of gut reaction that people often talk about. So we've got all this cortisol and all this adrenaline flooding through our bodies. But the other thing that's doing is it's actually cutting off this part of the brain, the thinking part of the brain. Now, we need that thinking part of the brain to think through problems and issues, puzzles. But in a scenario like this, when you're out on the plains, you don't necessarily want your brain to be thinking, okay, well, that footstep sounded as though it could have been, a friend, or, it was a particular likeness, so it could have been a gazelle. You don't have time for that. You want your body to get into a state ready to run. So the access to that cortex, that thinking part of your brain, is cut off temporarily. And in those days, it saved all our ancestors' lives, which is why we're here today. And why we've inherited that, that very normal reaction to stress. And this is the body's normal reaction to stress. It's a bodily function and it keeps us alive. However, there are a few things that are different now and then. So in those days, it may have been that you came across a predator and you would run from it or fight it. Or because you were out hunting, all that activity would probably just diffuse all the chemicals that are flooding your body. And in a quick time, they would disappear. And you can see this if any of you have watched David Attenborough or similar program where there's been a, gazelle that's been chased. Same thing would have gone on in their brain. Their amygdala would have released the chemicals and they would have ran really fast. And eventually, when they were safe, or they perceived themselves to be safe, they would stop and they would shake. And all that bodily action would get those chemicals move in and out of their body, used up. So in modern day life, this is something which happens to us over and over again. Forget about whether we're at work or not. Just on a normal day, we get up and we may have, kids to get off to school. We may spill the coffee. We may have to get to work, whether that's driving, whether that's on the tube, whether that's on the bus, dealing with all that, other people, public transport. And then when we get into work, we have the stresses come into coming at us, whether that is, in a kitchen, getting things out, done, serving customers, or as a manager overseeing it all, or working in a hotel, dealing with difficult guests, whatever it is. We all have stresses thrown at us throughout our working day, and you can add a layer of social media on top. So on our breaks, we might go out, maybe take a puff of a cigarette or have some coffee just to get those, adrenaline up again. And then look at social media, which may be, looking at Facebook or, LinkedIn, and perhaps, comparing ourselves to other people, or, as in my case, and I admit to this, it's doom scrolling on the news and looking at what the latest thing is. And I know for myself, if I've had a day of doing that, I go to bed a lot more stressed than if I had avoided it. So we can see how we're piling all these different stresses on throughout the day, and we're not really having the opportunity to let those chemicals die down in our body. And if you remember what's happening, if those chemicals are high, it is blocking the access to the thinking area of the brain, which is why you might have a feeling of brain fog, of not being able to think clearly. Emotions start running high, and it's just harder to get to sleep at night, because again, those chemicals are still going to be in your body by the time that you go to bed, or whatever time it might be if you're doing shift work. So you can see that just a normal day is going to be putting a lot of stress on our body anyway. Now, as I mentioned, our bodies are designed for stress. They're designed to get us away from that predator. So a little bit of stress is good. And actually, if you think about it, anybody that, has sat a driving test or, an exam, it's that little bit of, adrenaline and cortisol that actually gets you in the zone. And we call this eustress, peak performance. So down here, where you've got nothing going on, you've taken 2 weeks off work, which you thought were going to be amazing. But actually, by the last week, you're sort of thinking, oh, I'm ready to go back to work now. May not be true of you, but it is true of some people. If we're not getting enough stimulation, we are underachieving. And, a good example of that is, kids at school. If they're not getting enough stimulation, they do not, their brains do not develop. When we start to get stimulated, we start to get creative. We start to push ourselves. And then we move into this eustress area, whether it's, taking your driving test, doing an exam, or, actually in the zone while you are working. But too much of that, if that keeps going on and those stresses keep piling up, then we move into something called distress. And this is the area where, you get fatigued, distracted, you can't think because your brain is full of that adrenaline and cortisol. You get exhausted, emotions are high, so you can feel yourself getting irritable or angry, or even on, the edge of tears all the time. But, nothing wrong with crying. Crying helps us get stress out. But if you're crying a lot, then, that's a sign that there's a lot of stress going on in your body, probably too much. So while you just take that in, I'm just going to have a little bit of cast my eye over at the comments. So somebody says they identify with Addie. Yeah, lots of people do. And Julia nodding your head vigorously at all of this. Yes, definitely been in that zone often. And, that zone in itself, even if we're in the distress zone for a tiny amount of time, that's okay. Had to take a mindful break from social and other distractions to get myself back on track. It was all too much at once and bogging me down. Very true. And in fact, just taking a break from your phone is one of the simplest and quickest ways of just bringing those levels down. And, screen time, phones especially, social media, it's designed to keep us, wanting more. It's designed to keep us, I'm sure many of you had the experience where you've gone on and you started scrolling, and then a few minutes later you go like this. What was I doing? It's because the light on your phone actually flickers at a rate that is hypnotic. So, yeah, it's all very clever. So, eustress, good for you. Distress, no. And then we have acute stress. So this is when stress levels are really high up. And it may be for, a few days, Christmas period, for instance. So we're talking about exhaustion, trouble focusing, emotions high. If there are periods of rest, the body can cope with this. That's what our body is made for. But if there's not the periods of rest, then it becomes distressed. So as I mentioned, cortisol and adrenaline, you get that hijacked. And actually, if your brain and your body has been hijacked by cortisol and adrenaline for too long, that becomes the norm. And you can end up becoming, suffering or having anxiety because your brain is effectively stuck at that level. And as a therapist, one of the first things I do with clients who experience anxiety is first of all, I take them through some techniques which relaxes them, which actually shows their brain that there is another level of being, but we have to get the brain used to a lower level of arousal. So, cortisol, adrenaline hijack, immune system issues. If our brains are just so pumped with all those chemicals at that all the time, then it is going to affect our immune system. No wonder certain people are off ill in work if they are suffering from stress, because they're going to be more susceptible to things like flu and colds. There'll be a risk of illness and health conditions. Depression, as I mentioned, can lean on to burnout and unhealthy coping mechanisms. So things like, you might start smoking again or vaping more often or going, gambling, using drugs or alcohol. Or, even if we don't have any of those, more severe unhealthy coping mechanisms, we all have unhealthy coping mechanisms that we indulge in, whether it's staying up late and we know that we shouldn't, or it's drinking caffeinated drinks or too much sugar. These are the things that we know aren't great for us, and they're called unhealthy coping mechanisms. And so in that distress area, we tend to rely on these even more. So again, that's another sign. If you're, relying on these more than you used to, just check out whether distress is going on. So just to really embed that whole process of what's happening here. So just like dirty dishes piling up. So stresses pile up on stresses. The stresses of life, just getting out of the door in the morning. The stresses of, the workplace stresses. So actually getting your job done, working with colleagues, customers, the stuff that's going on in the news, this Middle East war, cost of living crisis, climate change, they can weigh heavily. Social media, and there may be other things going on in our lives, things with our kids or looking after our parents or a bereavement. And, as if you're a manager, yes, you can help with the workplace stress side of things, but we also have to remember that people have lives outside, and finding out about what is going on for them in their own lives, which I'm going to be talking about later. And if you can't particularly help yourself, but at least signposting them or offering a listening ear can also be helpful too. So stress is pile-on stresses. Your brain is firing off those chemicals. They hijack the brain, and they prevent us from using the cortex, the thinking part of our brain. This means that we don't think clearly, might find it hard to make decisions, even really simple decisions, and we get something called brain fog. If there's no time to clear the stresses because new stresses are being continuously laid on top, and there's no time to diffuse them, it gets to a point where even thinking of them can make you feel even more stressed. This means the brain is in a state of high alert. That's become our new normal. We might use unhelpful coping strategies, which make us feel better in the moment, but actually, it's only going to make things worse. We know that. And the reason why this is so worrying is because over time, it actually affects our brain. That thinking part of our brain will start to thin. Too much ongoing chronic stress thins the cortex, the thinking part of our brain, which means that we lose access to memory and focus. And there's also something else that goes on. It's almost like a protective thing that our brain does. In order to protect us from more stress, we start to isolate ourselves. So literally, we isolate ourselves from other people, whereas we might have gone out after work, we just go home because we can't. Our brain doesn't want us to even think about dealing with other people. We sort of feel emotionally cut off. We might feel a lack of connection, a lack of interest in other people. We might even start to become cynical. And these are just protective mechanisms to protect us from feeling even more stressed. It's as if we shut down a little bit. So I hope that has explained what's going on. And I am just going to check out the comments. And if you have any questions about that, please do feel free to ask. Yeah. Andrew says workplace is high, only to come home to things not going very well at home. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's common. It's not always about work. It's about things at home as well. I'm just going to stop a moment and just let anybody ask any questions if they have any.
Michelle says that she loves the dirty dishes analogy.
Brilliant. Thanks, Michelle. But I think it's a nice way of explaining it, isn't it? It's like another dirty dish, and it's easier to keep piling them up than just deal with them. Okay, Louise, if there is a pre-existing condition, burnout can happen quicker, e.g. people with ADHD or PMDD are at a greater risk of burnout. And I would say that goes for, physical conditions as well. So like if you're diabetic, for instance, or, you've got a chronic illness. It doesn't say that it's going to happen for sure. So if you do have one of those, ADHD or a physical condition, it doesn't necessarily, it's not given the truth, but actually, the risk is higher as well. And personal resilience comes into it too. We all have been brought up with different families or different carers, different environments, and there will be some people that are naturally a bit more resilient, and there are some people that perhaps are less resilient, and they're doing really interesting research now into epigenetics and genes, and whether they can be turned on and turned off at different times in our life and by different things. So there's so much that goes into this, and we don't know all of it now, at the moment. So Michelle says, and you forget the ones at the bottom of the pile too. Yeah, very true. Very true. Okay, so moving on from those dishes, it's probably making you feel stressful just looking at them. So hospitality, the hospitality industry has something else which some industries don't have. And that is called surface acting. So if you are customer facing, you may have to do what we call surface acting. And sometimes you won't, because sometimes what you are presenting to the outside world is you authentically. But, if we're having a bad day and if things are bad at home, then we're probably surface acting. We're probably portraying ourselves as more cheerful than we feel. And so suppressing our true feelings and hiding those so that the customer doesn't see it. If a customer comes up to us and, say it's somebody we know, asked how are we today, we don't go into, details of, my kid's failing at school and so on. We go, fine, or, hi, how are you? This is surface acting. And as you can see, as you can imagine, it's another stress on top of everything else. And it has been linked to emotional exhaustion. If we are pretending to be something that we are not, almost like masking, you can imagine how exhausting that is. There have been a lot of studies done around education and teachers for this, because they have to do a lot of surface masking as well, surface acting. Lower job satisfaction. Well, of course, because if you're, having to act as part of your job, you're not going to feel authentic. Higher staff turnover. Emotional dissonance. So emotional dissonance is when you might be saying something or acting in a certain way, but actually your feelings are very different. And that in itself is quite stressful. Sabotage of customers. You might just not be bothered to, to do the niceties, and obviously burnout. Okay, I'm just going to check the comments again because I can see they're coming through fast and furious. Michelle, we're an industry that attracts people with ADHD. Yes, very true. Yeah. Knowing this, how do we do enough to support people susceptible to burnout? Okay, Michelle, I'm going to be going into supporting people, whether they have ADHD or not, in a little while. So that's coming up. Zoe, do you feel surface act with colleagues as well? Yes, very true. You do. Not always, not all workplaces, sometimes there are some workplaces where everyone's quite honest and you are able to say what's going on in your life, but there are some workplaces where you can't. So my mum has spent years in a state of adrenaline and cortisol. It's only when I left home that I realized this wasn't normal. Yeah, that's so true. Like I said, we're all brought up in different environments. And if you've been brought up in an environment where, that stress and that state of adrenaline is the norm, then not only is that going to feel normal to you while you're in it, but even while you're out of it and cognitively, that that's not right, you may still subconsciously try and replicate it because that's what feels comfortable to you, even though it's not really comfortable. So Andrew says, agree, putting on a fake persona, trying to be nice when you're feeling awful is hard work. It is, isn't it? It is. And boundaries really important, not expecting people to do the hours that have historically been expected in the hospitality, courage and self-care. Yep, definitely. An industry that rewards those with no boundaries. So it's a catch-22 in a way. Yes, and it's about changing what we can in the industry, which is what, I know it's one of the things that the Burnt Chef is trying to do. So that surface acting thing, when I first came across it, I was blown away, to be honest, because when you know it and you think, oh my gosh, I feel that. So as a therapist, it's not hospitality, but as a therapist, of course, I can't go telling my clients, what's going on for me. So, very much in a similar position. So, okay, so here we come, Michelle. What can we do about it? So the answer isn't just time off. So a lot of employers, they think that they're being helpful and they're giving time off, and that's a good start. Actually having some time to step away is really important, and that is part of it. If it's yourself and time off is not an issue, I'll be talking about how to manage perception of time a little bit later. So we can make the time that we have just feel a little bit bigger. But that's coming up in a little while. So the human givens approach. So this is something that I am I'm trained in. That's my school of psychotherapy. And as I mentioned right at the beginning, it's something that Chris has also been trained into. And it's a really useful approach because it puts our emotional needs right at the heart of our mental health. And so the human givens basically talks about, just as we have certain physical needs, every living thing needs water, it needs air, it needs exercise or physical movement, it needs sleep, all of these things that it needs to survive. But we also have our emotional needs. So we're going to do a little bit of an exercise here. So I'm going to give you a moment if you need to go and get a paper and pen, or if you haven't got one handy, just, page on your phone. And we're going to do a little bit of a self-audit here, looking at your 9 emotional needs. So as I mentioned, just like physical needs, we have emotional needs. And human givens is very much about getting these needs met and getting these needs met in balance. So they are different for everybody. So community, for instance, I'll be talking us through each of those in a little moment. But community, for instance, the need for community is generally higher within extroverts than introverts. Some people's need for security is much higher than other people. So, if you are a risk taker, then your need for security is probably less than somebody else's. So recognizing that everybody has different levels of these needs, but also these needs need to be met in balance. So too much of any particular need can cause as much chaos and stress as not enough. So talking us through these needs. So first of all, a sense of security. So security can mean a lot to us. On one level, it can mean knowing that we can walk out of our front door and that we're, our neighbours are okay. We live in a safe area, that we can get home, at night safely if we're doing a late night shift. It can mean security within, the family, within the environment where you're brought up. We all know that children that are brought up in abusive or, toxic households, often grow up without that sense of security. And security in the workplace, knowing that we have an employer who puts our own health and safety, at the top of their list. So security is incredibly important to us. But too much security, and we end up not taking risks. We end up not trying new things because we are, locked in this feeling of needing to be secure. So we need to have just enough, but not too much. So I'm just going to give you a moment to have a little think. So imagine if it was on a scale of 1 to 10, and looking at your security, your levels of security, where are they? So let's say 1 is you're not feeling secure at all. 10 is, you're feeling pretty secure. Any more than 10, and you're way too secure, not taking any risks. And just give your life as a snapshot right now where you would be on security. And rather than think it through, often your gut instinct, your initial instinct is the right one to go to. So, attention. And you can write all these down and spend some more time later on this if you like after the session. So, attention. We all need to give attention and to receive it. So many of the people that I work with say, I get receiving attention. We all need attention, but giving attention. But giving attention is just as important as receiving it. If you think about us as, social and sociable creatures, and I often see it with parents whose, children have grown up and they're off at university or left home, and there is, no one left apart from their partner if they have one in the household to give that attention to. There's a name for it, isn't there? The sort of, empty nest syndrome. That need has gone. It's not fulfilled. So too little attention, whether it's giving and getting, and so too little attention giving it, there's just this gap, this need. Too little attention getting it, then we are going to feel neglected, ignored. Our sense of value and self-worth will go down. Too much attention, and you might feel yourself right in the spotlight and find it quite unwelcoming. And giving too much attention can lead you to feel depleted, exhausted, at the beck and call of everybody else, putting everybody else first. So again, just think of attention in your life and how well that need is being met. Next, we have a sense of control. So this is a sense of autonomy, of being able to control your life and your environment. So this can be anything from deciding what it is that you're going to have for dinner, to being in control of your finances, to being in control of your career and being able to make career decisions. So too little control, and you are going to feel out of control. You're going to feel buffeted by here, there, and everywhere, by other people or things happening to you. Too much control, and you will, to other people, you might come over as a bit of a micromanager. Again, too much control, and you probably won't want to be taking risks, which are all part of growing. Too much control, and you won't want to relinquish that. So you might find yourself just, clinging on to it, or dominating, or even bullying others at the real extreme. So again, just a few moments just to score yourself on where you are now. So I'm going to do the next two together, community and intimacy. So because this is all about our connections and our relationships with other people. So I mentioned that some people, need community in quite, high levels, and some people will need less of it. And community can be found in many different ways. It can be found with your team at work. It can be found perhaps, through your church congregation or religious congregation. It can be found through a book club or a running group, a group of friends, your family, online gaming community. It can be found in many, many different ways. But what it is, it's that sense that we belong to something. And again, right back again to our ancestors who were out there on the plains. If one of them was ousted from that group, they would probably die quite quickly. So a sense of feeling supported and part of community is actually really drilled right down into our DNA because it makes us feel safe. And likewise, it's called intimacy here, but I actually prefer the word connection because I think intimacy sounds a bit too much like a romantic relationship, and it doesn't have to be. But we need a sense of connection with at least one person in our lives that accepts us for who we are, that isn't trying to change us. And it could be a romantic partner, could be best friends, child, parent, sibling, colleague. And most of us, we don't have too many of those in our lives, probably 3, 4, because, obviously we have to do the same for them, and it's quite intense and time consuming. But if you're not getting both of these, then you are going to feel perhaps isolated, lonely. And if you are getting too much of them, so too much community, and again, you might feel suffocated. Too much intimacy or too much connection with different people, you may feel suffocated. Or even if you don't, you may just not have much time because you're doing this, that, and everything to either please somebody or stay connected with them. Okay, someone's asked about control. I'm going to come back to that in a sec when I've just gone through the needs. So just score yourself on those, community and intimacy. So we're moving on to status. And status isn't about being the boss or being better than anyone else. It's about being heard and seen. So if you're working in a team and you know that when you make a suggestion, it is at least going to be listened to and considered, then you have status within that team. If you know that that's just going into the ether and no one's even considering it in any seriousness, then you don't have status. That's not necessarily about you. It's probably about the team. So we need to feel that we are going to be heard and listened to and taken seriously, not just at work, but by our families, by our friends. So too little, as I mentioned, if we're not heard, then that's going to make us feel neglected. It's going to impact on our self-esteem. Too much status, and then we're moving into the too much control territory here, and there's a possibility that we could take advantage of it. Or if, we're making all the decisions and we're not listening to others, then we may make the wrong decisions and things will go terribly wrong. So just a moment here, just to score yourself on status. Now moving on to achievement. This is incredibly important when it comes to mental health, actually. I would say it's one of the key needs, and it's something, the beauty of it is that it's something that if you feel that your mental health is a little bit wobbly, that you can do something about quite quickly. So a sense of achievement. And it's different things for different people. So for some people, it might be, getting that app couch to 5K and actually reaching that 5K. For some people, it can be learning a language. For some people, it's just getting the kids out to school, with everything that they need. People who are incredibly, depressed, building a sense of achievement, maybe just about getting out of bed, having a shower, and walking down to the corner shop. Different levels for different people. But what that achievement does is every time that we set a goal, however small, and achieve it, it is releasing chemicals, feel-good chemicals, dopamine, into our bodies. And it is, but as well as making us feel good, it is building our sense of self-esteem, which is really important when it comes to mental health. And when I work with people, I often encourage them to do something physical as a sense of achievement, because not only does it impact upon your mental health, but it impacts upon your physical health, helping you get fitter or stronger or more flexible. And it doesn't have to be, this massive, I am going to run a marathon. It can be, just doing press-ups or sit-ups, or doing a 10-minute yoga video on YouTube. It's a really nice way to build up your sense of self-esteem, your sense of achievement. And if there's not enough sense of achievement, then that sense of esteem is going to be low, and you lose motivation, as I've talked about before. Too much achievement. Now, you see this in people who set themselves goals and just move on, achieve that, move on to the next thing, move on to the next thing. And they just keep going and going and going. And this is not workplace related. This is themselves. They just keep pushing themselves and pushing themselves, until they just reach a point of exhaustion. So you need to be careful about that too much achievement. And I think as a workplace, something that we can do is recognize small achievements, even just end of a shift, just recognizing that, thanking people, saying well done, or whatever it is. And doing this for ourselves is important. And in our own lives, recognizing even those little things that we do. I work with a group of psychologists. It's like a peer mentor group, and achievement is obviously very, very big, because we know how important it is. And somebody mentioned, well, achievement's great, but how are you going to celebrate it? And we all looked around, and it was really sad, actually, at how few of us, celebrated our achievements, even in little ways. So I encourage you to think about different ways that you can celebrate your own achievements. And again, another tip, this is especially for parents, actually, if you have children, to stop them turning into this person that is always achieving. When you are commenting on their achievements, it's not just, oh, you did really well in that exam, great, you got 80% or whatever it is. It is, I saw all the hard work that you put in. So that's my, suggestion to help parents recognize, and help them get their kids to recognize it's about hard work. And again, as employers, that's something that we can do in the workplace, recognizing not just the measured achievement, but the hard work that goes into it. So quick stop here while I'll just let you score yourselves for achievement. And then privacy. So privacy, again, it's one of these things that's on many levels. So one of it is about having that literal space to ourselves, whether it is, our own locker or our own corner of, the dining room, or, just a room or a place that we can feel is ours. But there's more to it than that. It is having that space. So as we know, as I've mentioned, all these stresses and so on coming into us, fogging out our brain with cortisol and adrenaline, having time for our brain to recover is really important, almost like going offline. And if we are getting on that bus or getting in a queue and getting our phone out, we are not giving our brains time to do that. When I was little, it was called daydreaming. But, actually it's been, studies have proven that doing something like just looking out of the window and observing a tree in the wind for a few minutes is a really simple and easy way just to reset your brain and just to bring those arousal levels down. And it isn't just for things in the moment. If we have that space in our lives, it gives us a chance to de-arouse ourselves and think about the big decisions. Do I want to be with this person? Do I want to be in this job? What do I want to do with my life? So privacy is essential on so many levels. Just give yourself a little score there. And then meaning and purpose. So again, this is a big one. And often people who feel a sense of meaning and purpose, one, they have a lot more motivation in their lives, but two, they have something that actually gives them a reason why they are doing what they are doing, which can help with their mental health. So meaning and purpose, we can get it in many different ways. So the first thing is through our roles. We can get it as a role as a partner, parent, child, sibling, friend, and through our job, through our role at work. We can also get meaning and purpose through something higher, through our religion, through our spirituality. We can get meaning and purpose through being part of an activist group or a political group. But it doesn't always have to be high and lofty. We can get meaning and purpose. Some people get meaning and purpose through, following a certain football team and going to all their matches and being part of that, that group of fans. But it's as though there's something that gives you your why you are doing things in your life. So again, just a few moments there. I'm just going to check on the chat, but I invite you just to make any comments about whether you had any surprises with your scores or how you found that exercise. And again, if you have a team yourself, actually doing this as a team exercise is really interesting, and noting what conversations come out of it. The more you learn about your colleagues, one colleague has a real strong need for community, whereas somebody else has less of a need. You can learn a lot yourself. Okay, that's fine, Colleen. Got to head off. Yes, somebody asked about control, and yes, too much and too less control. Less control to some employers seems like no leadership. It's a really good question, and it's interesting for the hospitality industry because we have very specific things around health and safety, obviously. So there needs to be a certain level of control, rules, regulations, or whatever that are followed. But when it comes to leadership, and obviously this is beyond the scope of this this little seminar, but I think it's about looking to what type of leader you want to be and what type of leader is needed to get the job done. So there are occasions where you do need to be more autocratic, where you do need to say, this and this is happening at this particular time. It needs to be done. There are some environments where you can be more of a coaching leader and basically coach people to take responsibility for getting the job done. So there's lots of different types of leadership. But I think the point about, if you have to be quite in control at a certain time to get a certain thing done, there needs to be those other times where that control comes back, where you step back and you allow your employees and your team members to have some type of say. Because remember, it's important for them to feel that they're getting attention, that they have a sense of status, and even, having a say in what's going on may give them a sense of achievement and meaning and purpose. So thinking about how you can get your team and your employees' needs met through that sense of leadership is important. And, we're not going to unravel it in this quick thing here, but it's something that's really useful to think about. How do we set the control lines, especially in a big operation? So I hope that helps with what I said just now about, there needs to be a point where you can give your employees and colleagues a sense of control, even though, let's say 70% of the time you are in control. I used to love to once a day, find someone on the team and sit down, have a coffee tea with them and chat about their life. Yes, John, I'm going to talk about that actually. That's really, yeah. So just chatting and making connections with people. And that's one of the things that I'm going to be talking about in a moment. Okay, so this is something, it's called the emotional needs audit, and it's something that I really encourage people to do on a regular basis, because things can change in a moment. If you just think about it, if someone gets, goes through a breakup, their sense of security is gone, sense of attention from that person's gone, sense of control, sense of intimacy is gone, status, achievement, and even meaning and purpose may be affected. So, when things come along that shake our lives, doing this emotional needs audit is really useful. Okay, so signs that control and security are issues for yourself or other people: insomnia, worrying, or somebody, hopefully not you, but somebody that, is actually finding themselves, acting like a control freak, being very, very, precise about what they want people to do. So how can you foster a sense of control and security for others? So as I mentioned, allow them some input, whether it's over what's happening, whether it's over shifts, whether it's over work duties. Give them a sense of control over something, and a sense of security. Obviously, I know, many companies within hospitality and other industries, they do, 0 hours, I think it's called, or they can't always promise enough shifts. And I think what helps the person on the end of that is if you explain why, and if that is going to change. In that case, they can make an informed decision about whether this is right for themselves. And the other thing you can do is ask. John's mentioned about asking conversations about, their own lives, but ask about their duties in their workspace. What can they do to make it feel better or feel safer, which of course is really important. And this can be done as a group or individually. If bullying or, safety issues are brought to your attention, addressing those straight away, immediately, firmly, get it done. Reassure people that you are concerned about them. And also their security outside, outside the home. Getting home or to work safely is important. And, responsibilities don't just end when they walk out of the door. For ourselves, if you've come out a bit low on the control or the security, think about what you might need to feel safe and secure. And it may be nothing at all to do with work. It may be that you find yourself in a relationship where you don't feel particularly safe from criticism, for instance. What can you do about that? What can we do to feel more in control of things, even if they're little things like leaving early for work so we know we're going to get there, or have a conversation with a friend who actually is really good at putting a spreadsheet together that can help us, you know, feel more in control of our finances. So status and attention. So in a workplace, or, you know, looking at colleagues that, you know, maybe having issues with status and opinions, attention rather. So they might not be offering opinions. They might, you know, if there are those sessions where you allow them to, you know, speak up and be heard, if there's somebody who's not actually saying anything, then maybe something like around status or attention is going on for them. If you know that they are looking demotivated, or they're just not comfortable to join in socially. On the other hand, you know, if there is bullying going on, or control or intimidation, and this is being brought to you, you know, on a regular basis, then perhaps there's something culturally or systemic going on in the organization. And somebody's mentioned, if there's a history of trauma, safety is even more important. Definitely, definitely. And we might not know this. So, you know, we have to take it that there may be. So clues that status and attention are a problem. So bullying, or on the other hand, not offering opinions, and what can we do about it? So when we are having those group sessions or those one-to-ones, you know, ask their opinion, showing them their views account, encourage a culture where everyone has a voice. You can set up a mentor or a buddy system, so that, you know, there's somebody that's backing them up, or somebody they can talk to first if they want to bring something to management's attention, and then they can both bring it to you. Invest in building a team culture where people are encouraged to look out for each other. Obviously, that's going into the realms of leadership and development, but that's something that you could be looking at if that's, you know, if status and attention is an issue in the workplace. For ourselves, if we're not getting enough attention, can we fulfill this through work, or maybe outside work? You know, it is infeasible to accept that work is going to fulfill all of our needs. So what can we do, you know, outside work? You know, whether it is going online dating, or joining a amateur dramatics, or just spending some time with friends that we know that you know, make us laugh and actually, you know, value our company. And are we giving enough attention to work, to others? Are we just there, concentrate on getting the job done? Or, you know, are we checking in on our colleagues? Are we checking in on, you know, other people? Achievement. So sign that achievement is out of balance. So if somebody isn't, you know, feeling stretched, they may be, you know, looking, or they, you know, you may perceive that they're demotivated, just not interested, or just doing what they need to and getting that done. Or, you know, on the other side, if they're always wanting to do more, to impress, you know, maybe this strong sense of achievement is driving them too hard, or yourself. So what can we do for other people? So as I mentioned before, noticing and celebrating small wins, acknowledgement, creating a culture of learning where people have an opportunity to achieve. And these could be in-house workshops, away days, courses. You know, teams can teach other members of the teams. It doesn't necessarily have to be about stuff in the workplace, you know, it could be about other things. For those that are overachievers, you know, encourage them to put those that energy into mentoring or buddying others, and they can pass their skills and experience onto them and give attention to others. You know, you can get a few needs met at the same time sometimes. Again, ask for feedback. What would your team like to know or do? You know, and find out about their life outside work. What are their interests? What have they achieved outside work? But also, you know, if we are giving them workshop after workshop after, you know, away day and so on, Ask them, is this too much? Are you finding all this incredibly, helpful? And if it's too much, then what is right for you? So getting that education balance right. And for ourselves, are we feeling stretched? And if not, sometimes when people are not feeling stretched, they immediately think of work, and then they end up changing their job to feel something, a new sense of achievement. But as I said, it's not always the workplace that brings that sense of achievement. It could be that we can, learn belly dancing, start bird watching, whatever it might be, which would give us a nice, well-rounded life. And if we're feeling a constant need to achieve, and actually, I'm actually coming across this one more than a lack of achievement. If we're feeling that constant need to achieve, if it feels like we're on a bit of a treadmill, then, and actually we're playing a hand in, in burnout ourselves, slowing down, taking the pressure off ourselves. This is easier said than done, I know. But, building those moments, which I'm going to be talking about, into our day where we slow down, giving ourselves permission not to do that next thing, and just to maybe to sit this one out, this course out, if it's not that necessary. Just taking time out and slowing down and recognizing that, our worth is not tied in to what we are achieving. We are much more than that. Privacy. So privacy can be a problem on many levels. You've got people being, sorry, excuse me. People being quiet because they're afraid of speaking out. Teasing, but, could be seen as bullying. No space to call your own, literally. Someone who can't think straight, maybe they've got too much going on and they just can't. They're flustered, there's brain fog going on, or perhaps they're rushing around and making mistakes, or even personal hygiene. These are clues that privacy might be a bit of an issue. So what do we need? We need a place of our own. We need spaces for downtime. Also, as a workplace, it's good to know about extroversion, introversion. So many people think that it's about how loud you are or how confident it is, but how you are. But actually what it is, it's about where you get your energy from. And extroverts get their energy from being around others, but introverts need time to recharge. So we need spaces to recharge, even if it's a backyard where they can go and, watch birds in a bird bath. We introverts, and I count myself as one of them, need that space to recharge. So encouraging people to get outside or just a quick walk around the block on their break rather than sitting down somewhere on their phone. Encourage conversations around self-care, which is more than just a bubble bath. Self-care is actually taking the time out, thinking about those emotional needs. And for ourselves, recognize how much privacy we need on a regular basis and work out a plan to get that. Those people with young children are probably the ones that suffer most from a lack of privacy, because you may go from work to being at home with young kids and never feel as though you're getting a break. Know whether you yourself are an extrovert or an introvert and how much time you may need from other people. And what are you doing as self-care? What are you doing to meet those emotional needs? And connection and community. So these are the things about other people, as I mentioned, somebody feeling isolated, lonely, or not joining in socially, perhaps the shyness and social anxiety. They might be a sign that they're not connected to other people. Or too much partying, that's gone right the other way. They've got too much community and connection going on. So For somebody who hasn't got enough, encourage them to join in social events. That buddy and mentoring system can really help them. The team building those connections. What's their life outside work? Volunteering policy, getting them out in the community. And for ourselves, looking at the relationships that are important to us, how to nurture them, maybe volunteering ourselves, or looking at what community we can become part of. I talked about anything from book group to running club to, religious groups. There's a endless amount of things out there. And then meaning and purpose. So when meaning and purpose are not right, we get a lack of interest and motivation, confusion about what to do with your life, feeling of worthlessness, and a lack of confidence because you haven't got the why driving you. So as managers, we can find out why people are doing the job. What are the other roles in their life? Are they looking after aging parents, for instance? Give them a sense of purpose. You don't just take it for granted they know what their importance is in the whole running of things. Tell them. Share the team and company goals. Where is this business going? And these are the values, and this is why, we do what we do. And obviously have respect for other people's faith, for their politics, for their, supporting a certain football club, whatever it is. Bring all that into the workplace with respect. And ourselves, thinking about our own roles, our own faith, politics, philosophy. What impact does it have on our own lives? Or are we so busy we don't even think about it? What values do we have? What's important to us? Values may be things like, family or integrity or, learning. What's really important to us, and how do we know when they're being attacked or just subtly eroded away? So somebody mentioned about sitting down with, with your colleagues and team members. And this is a lovely informal way to find out more about other people. I know you're going to be getting these slides, so don't worry about copying these down, but there's topics here. And they all tie back into those emotional needs. So even if you just, start asking about those, asking about how they're sleeping, is the environment stressful, what's going on in their life. And if they bring something up, then act on it. Don't just make that a one-off conversation that has no importance. And if you get, if somebody mentions that things are hard, or that you get a gut reaction that something is going on, delve further, find out what help they need, signpost to, the Burnt Chef or charities or whatever if things are really tough. Have the conversation, but make it count. So that's the informal approach, making conversations normal part of the culture and doing them regularly. It doesn't have to be an interrogation. You don't have to cover all those questions, maybe just one or two. And the important thing actually for both of you is that, I think John mentioned it, is that you share as well. So that builds up that sense of trust. It releases oxytocin in the brain, which is a bonding hormone. Asking open-ended questions. Not do you think that, we can change things to make it safer here, but, what could we change? And this may take time. You're not going to sit down with someone in 15 minutes and suddenly you're going to have, window into their soul. Just like making a friend, this will take time to happen. If you're not sure about something that they're saying, reflect back to them. Make sure that they've got time to talk. So don't just fit it in. It's 5 minutes now. Let's just sit and have a quick chat. Make time for it. And for some people, if you're sat opposite them, that can be quite intimidating. So I know someone's just mentioned about social anxiety down there. So, doing something perhaps where you're, working side by side, or you're driving to go and get something, it's a lot less intimidating than, staring into somebody's eyes. Now, there will always be people that complain. They're an integral part of any workplace. But it's important as colleagues, managers, actually knowing the difference between a valid opinion and a complaint. Because even that person that has a reputation for being complaining, they don't just switch off. There may be something valid in there. There may be something important in there. And as I said, follow up if needed. And then there's the formal approach, rather. So if you think that it's the actual workplace that's an issue, and maybe some of the things that have come up today have made you think of that, then you can conduct a workplace stress assessment. You can get one at hse.gov.uk. But again, decide what it is you're going to do with it. Are you going to actually act on it? Are you going to take it, higher up in the management? If this is going to get very formal, it is worth documenting things. Very important, though, if you've had that informal chat with somebody, what they've said to you informally is not documentary evidence. If you want it to be, you need to have a conversation with them about that, because those are two very different things. So I've talked about time. So many of us, we don't have a lot of time, and actually having that break is not an option. So things that we can do is create the illusion of time, the perception of time. So when we have our breaks, actually getting out, if you can get out early in the morning, by, whether it's on a break or walking to work, there's a specific light called lux that hits the back of our eyes and resets our body clock. And it allows our body to release melatonin at the right time and helps us get to sleep. So getting out on breaks, looking at nature, even if it's a blooming plant that you've brought into the office, or looking out at the window. Encouraging movement, between, if you've got a desk job, for instance, some of you may, actually getting up and moving and breathing. There's a little breathing exercise that I'm going to do in a moment. And it may be different for you. You may have your own different ways of creating an illusion of time. But, just thinking about what we can do to make that time that we have feel bigger. So here is the exercise. And this is something actually that is great for us if we are feeling stressed. It is incredibly good for panic attacks. They often teach it to people who have regular panic attacks. And the idea is that we don't just do it when we need it. We do it at regular times during the day. So if you think about it, if during the day our stress levels have gone from here when we wake up, cortisol is quite high when we wake up actually. And then we spilled that cup of tea and they've gone up. We've had to get to work, they've gone up again. We've got into work, they got up. We had a bit of a tiff with a colleague, they've gone up again. By the time you're ready for bed, the stress levels are up here. If we breathe regularly through the day, what happens is we wake up with cortisol there and maybe tip that cup of coffee over. It's up there, but we breathe, so it's down again. Something else happens, breathe, and it's down again. So rather than being up here, where it's time for bed, we're sort of down here or even a bit lower. And over time, as you practice this, your body sort of learns it and just drops into it. So what we're going to do, I invite you to practice this with me now. So the first thing I'd like you to do is just to give yourself a score, 1 to 10, of how stressed you feel right now. So 1 being totally blissful, 10 being quite stressed, pretty stressed. So, or emotionally aroused if it's not stress. So for me, obviously I've been delivering this, so God knows how much adrenaline and cortisol is going through my body. So I think I'm probably at I'd say a 7.5. So the first thing we're going to do is just get comfortable. Put your feet on the ground if you can. I'm going to change your breathing if you don't already. So most of us, we tend to breathe into our chests. We're going to just breathe into tummy or abdomen. So what that's doing is that's bringing the oxygen right down to the bottom of our lungs. Now we're going to just manipulate that breathing a tad. You can close your eyes if it helps. And what we want to do is we want to make the breathing longer on the out breath than the in breath. Now they teach this at 7-11. So breathing in for 7 and out for 11. However, if you're used to breathing quite shallowly, that will be hard. So I often suggest people start at 5. So breathing in for 5 and just feel in your tummy expand. You maybe put your hand there if you like. And then out for 8. And just carry on doing that while I just tell you why this works so well. So we have 2 nervous systems in our body. One is called the sympathetic nervous system. And that's all about feeling alert and awake and ready to react. Obviously, when we're working, when we're on shift or whatever it is, we are very much in the sympathetic nervous system. But we have another one called the parasympathetic nervous system, and that's all about rest and relaxation and digestion too. And the more we are in the sympathetic nervous system, obviously the less we're in the other one, the parasympathetic nervous system. And what we want to do, if we want to reset our brains, reduce those arousal levels, we need to get into the parasympathetic nervous system. And this is the quickest way in, just through our breathing. So my suggestion, if you like, is to think about when you can practice these moments of breathing. So I always like to tag it onto something you do already. So for some people, it might be every time you make yourself a cup of tea or coffee, you breathe while the kettle's boiling. Or it could be every time that you go into the bathroom, which is a nice, easy one, which we all do. And even just a few rounds is enough, just to bring those arousal levels down. And then again, you can do this just before you drop off to sleep. It can help you drop into sleep. And you can do this if you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't get back to sleep. And even if you don't get back to sleep, if you lie there doing this breathing, you are giving yourself rest and recuperation. So rather than lying there tossing and turning and thinking, oh, I can't sleep, just doing this may help you get off to sleep. But at the very least, it will help your body reset and feel more comfortable in the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, so just one big breath to resume. And coming out. If you're feeling a little bit sleepy, you can just wake yourself up by doing this. Okay. So obviously, the Burnt Chef has got lots of support, help and guidance. You can check out the website. There's lots of links and ideas of where you can go next. I know this recording is going out and the slides. And that is it for me today. I'm just going to look back over the chat, see if there's any questions that I missed, or feel free to just ask me a question here. I hope you found it really helpful. Yeah, please do, work on burnout, notice it in others, and especially, check out your own situation and take action. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Paula. I'm sure people who are watching this currently, and we had over 40 people throughout that watching that, so that's fantastic. Found that a great benefit, but also there'll be this will be recorded on LinkedIn and Facebook, so this will be available to be reviewed back. So hopefully the benefit of this will continue. If you're interested in learning more, or perhaps having a session virtually or in person from Paula, then head over to our website and to the training section, where you'll find information on how to book that. We will also be sharing a feedback form as well. So we'd love to hear your thoughts about what you think went well with this, any areas that perhaps we could improve on. And yeah, we'll be sharing that in the comments very shortly. So feel free to give us your feedback. And again, Paula, thank you. It's a good reminder for anyone who's perhaps, experiencing some of the things that you've mentioned today, into actually how we can start to create some healthy boundaries and start to look and identify perhaps some of those things that we can spend a little more time and focus on. So yeah, personally, thank you very much for that, and look forward to doing more with you soon.
Okay.
Thank you.